Teaching is hard, and oftentimes it isn't what happens in the classroom that makes the job difficult. It's what happens before and after school, during passing periods, at lunch, in meetings, or in our lives outside of school that challenges our ability to stick with the profession. TeacherGuard is committed to focusing on making teaching sustainable and enjoyable. We want to make the rewards of the profession seem more attainable and the challenges more bearable. Our mentorship model pairs teachers with consistent daily support from a peer educator. Through TeacherGuard's four sustainability principles, we will walk the challenging times with you and allow you to enjoy the wins and celebrations that come with this beautiful profession. See teacherguard.net for more information and to explore how you can join our community of educators today. We hope you enjoy today's podcast.
All right, welcome back. Thank you, Pete, for joining me. I can't thank you enough. Known you for a long time. You were one of the first administrators that I ever worked with in my career as a teacher when I was an intern. So happy to have you on the show. Welcome in.
Thanks. Good to see you, Adam.
I'd like to start off just by asking you to share a little about yourself, how you started as a teacher and how you got to where you are now and what you do now.
Yeah, I think I started in elementary school and came back to San Diego after grad school, after attending UC San Diego, and spent, I don't know, 8 or 9 years as a fourth and fifth grade teacher before I came to the Proy School, which is where you and I met. Um, so the elementary background, but then I took a 20-year detour into secondary, most of that as an administrator at Preuss, 18 years at Preuss. And I always intended to get back to elementary school. It just, I was so dedicated to what Preuss stood for as a mission. And it was everything that I had, been searching for when I entered the teaching profession, to kind of that transformational change and hopefully impacting our community, just not just locally, but I think we had a national impact with what we were doing at Preuss way back when.
Yeah.
So finally, I'm back. I'm in Chula Vista Elementary School District, and I'm principal there. And it's a great group of teachers and great community, great, fantastic kids. So it's I'm hoping this is my last school site before I venture into retirement here.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, so you've worked with a broad range from all ages, right? Teachers that teach all different kinds of grades. And obviously you mentioned working a lot in secondary. Now you're back in elementary. Would you say that across the board there are similar factors that maybe fight against teacher sustainability and their ability to remain in the classroom?
Sure. I think it can never be stated well enough for folks who haven't done it, right? Just how demanding the profession is. If you really want to be good at it, it takes such a commitment. Everything in your being, I think, to prepare and to keep your body healthy and to find the right group of support systems around you. Finding schools where the climate and culture is conducive to growth and to sustainability. It's not surprising that the statistics I used to always quote about teachers leaving the profession was 50% don't make it to year 5 in urban settings, right? So it's still, at as much as it ever was, I think still a significant challenge to achieving our goals of educating everyone in our society, right? It's critical. I've been doing this for so long now, right? But I try to always kind of keep that perspective that, in terms of a public education system on a scale this size, no one's ever really tried to do it and educate every child in a country of this size.
Right.
The degree that we do, it's try to give us a little bit of grace as a nation, and so it could be argued that it really is only been the last 20 years that we were significantly, changing, our goals as a system to really make sure that there's equity and everybody's being educated. So.
Yeah, I hear that all the time, right? That we've been around for our 250th year now as a nation, but compared to the world, this is still an experiment, right? We're still figuring things out, and education is one of those things.
Absolutely.
Um, and I think about my intern experience, working with you as the first AP that I ever had as a supervisor. It's pretty jarring when you leave because I was an intern while I was going through my credentialing program, and I had the support of not only the professors, but you're there with your peers who are working on getting their credentials with you. You're going through the same things. You're teaching during the day, and then you're complaining at night with each other, right? You have a community. And then all of a sudden, that student teaching or internship experience ends, and you are in a position where you're on your own in your first teaching assignment. So why don't people get to year 5 typically? Maybe it's because that feeling of you just got stripped of everything that was a support to an extent, unless you actively pursue help. Can you talk a little about that? What that experience is for teachers that you see that are coming in that maybe had that cushion of support and all of a sudden you don't have it anymore?
Yeah, it's definitely, I think, in every leadership position, it was for me, it was always about trying to replicate the experiences that I had that were successful. So as a teacher, I worked, for this principal. His name was Gil Gutierrez Senior. His son also became a principal as well, junior. But Gil Senior, he was National Principal of the Year, and he built a school with that sense of community, where any picked like-minded teachers. So like I think there was something like almost 100 of us. It was a giant elementary school. But just picking young people that were committed and had similar kind of philosophy and values that could support each other. And I remember I was at like year 5 or something, right? I'm the vet, year 4 or 5. I'm the vet. And there was a group of us that we would just go walk around the school after school to kind of check on people, and just sometimes pick them up off the ground crying,
Yeah.
right? Like just, and kind of building, helping to invite them into circles that were more supportive and everything. And so I always remembered the way Gil kind of built his school around, around support and around, kind of focusing on the mental health and, physical health of students first, kids in poverty. And so if you're not taking care of those kind of basic human needs for both the children and the adults, right? Like,
Yeah.
and managing the stress, then nothing else is going to work. And so, I think Preuss, we kind of nailed it with the people that we hired as teachers there. And I think that was you know, I always say that, I think the original leadership, Doris and Scott, always um, focused on these really high performing, high achieving teachers, right? And then they transitioned over time and realized that maybe that high performance, high achievement wasn't the critical piece as much as like the commitment and the to the mission, right? And
Mhm.
so I think they made that transition. And that's kind of where I came in, where I was like, that was like what really motivated me was the mission and finding people with the shared values and that sense of team, right? You have to
Yep.
have a team around you. It takes, if your whole family has to kind of, be oriented to making you successful as a teacher, especially in those first 10 years, right?
Yeah.
It's such a commitment um, of everything in school and outside of school.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, you mentioned Scott, and he was the principal when I was there, and this was a decade and a half ago, and there was a line that he said at a staff meeting that still lives with me today. He said something along the lines of the difference between success and good luck is consistency. And going through as a first year teacher, I mean, I wanted to be perfect right away.
Right.
Right. And what that led to was a lot of anxiety when I would walk into my classroom, wondering if you or Scott or if another administrator was going to walk in when my kids were bouncing off the walls or not being quiet long enough for me to be able to teach my lesson, because I didn't want you all to perceive me as nothing less than, like you said, a high achieving teacher. And I wish I would have heard that line from him earlier in the year, because to this day, I think that is so true. The people that are successful, you're not perfect every day. You're not even outstanding every day. You're there every day. You're good and you try and you are a team player. You believe in the mission of the environment that you're in. Um, and you're just stable. And I'm wondering what your take is on that, on whether that's something that maybe we need to communicate with teachers a little bit more from the beginning.
For sure, and it brings back so many memories, conversations about, how we're gonna get people in who are successful, and it was, if you were dedicated to the mission and you believe that the kids deserve, to be on a college track in a in a, you know, from backgrounds who historically would not attend college, right? If you really believe that, then you'd figure it out. You get together with other people and figure it out. But I think that consistency is exactly right. Being on balance, work school life balance, work life balance. I talk about that with my teachers now all the time. It's just like, I try to model it now because it's one thing at Proyas. I used to probably say those things, but then I was there 20 hours a day,
Mhm.
right? Like, it's like, practice what you preach a little bit. I'm finally got to that point where I own that now, and if I'm working late, I'm trying not to brag about it. If I have to stay late, because I just, that consistency and balance, um, day in and day out, show up is 100%. I think the right approach.
Yeah, and there is something to that, right? To that, and that could be just maybe a capitalistic thing, a United States thing, but like the you are always working kind of thing, right? And if you're not always working, then you're not doing a good job. And I remember thinking, um, when I would hear people say, I stayed up till midnight doing this, and whether it was an administrator or a teacher, my initial thought was maybe you're not doing it right. Maybe you're not, time managing your tasks, or maybe you're thinking the expectation is greater than it is for what you have to produce. And as a result, what you're not saying when you're saying that you're working late or that you didn't get enough sleep is that you probably took time from your family away or from yourself if you're single and you do things for fun that you didn't do because you were putting in these hours. And so it's great to hear from you as a leader of a school that a priority for you is accentuating that and not just not saying it because maybe you are, but I find more value in an administrator when I see him or her saying to me, "Oh, I'm doing great. I'm never looking stressed," and stuff like that, versus like, "Yeah, I was up till midnight last night," and stuff like that. So is that something that you learned recently or something that you feel you've always kind of known, but it's always difficult to embrace because of that pressure that you may feel?
Yeah. No, I think it's. I think I've always known it, right, and being able to live it. It's I think that was a big part of leaving Preuss. Like, I just couldn't break the cycle at Preuss, where it to have the kind of success that we had obviously really high performing people all around us. Um, but, you know, besides just the classroom instruction, to build that sense of community in a school where the kids had robotics programs and they had, the arts and music performance and talent shows and dances and all the sporting events that we were constantly hosting. It took someone being there for all that. And so,
Yeah.
man, that was, for me, that was 7 days a week. It was, it was everything I had, and I loved it. I mean, I loved what we were accomplishing, and I loved being at every one of those events. So to have a job where you love, but I think the the sacrifices that my own children experienced was when my own children kind of said, well, Dad, you're at soccer games, lacrosse games, and dances and robotics every night. When are you going to come to our stuff?" And I was like, I couldn't, because if I mean, and there was two administrators at Preuss who was gonna be there for the lacrosse game, or who was gonna be there
Right.
for the dance up till midnight on a Friday night, right? And so um, that's really kind of, for me, wanting to get back to elementary school, was I figured there would be less of that night and weekend. Even though I loved it,
Mhm.
I had to kind of create some balance. So that was one of the primary focus of leaving Preuss for me, was kind of getting out of secondary, finding a different kind of lifestyle.
Yeah.
Because it was, you couldn't not show up when you had all these dedicated people who needed you to show up, right? Like, first, it's just, you had to be there. And so I still am a work in progress on this. Like, there's days where, the amount of challenges you experience, or that, your other adults around you or need your help with, all one day, and whether it's, 15 parents and 4 teachers that all need you right now,
Mhm.
and you just can't do it. And so, trying not to look hazard, trying not to complain, trying not to, you know, look stressed, right? Because it really helps everybody else. But it's probably not something that comes naturally to me, but I'm still working on progress on it.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember one afternoon after I was done teaching at Preuss, I was walking because it's located on the same campus as the university where I was getting my credential. Um, and I was walking to class, and I think you were on your way out as well, and you offered to give me a ride. And on the drive there, you said something along the lines of, you thanked me about not sending kids to your office so much throughout the year. And then you mentioned, having to speak to so many kids about chewing gum, things that are trivial like that, right? And and I remember thinking like, whoa, like I did not know that I could send kids to you for little things like that, but I would see, right, kids standing outside of classrooms because they got kicked out, or teachers asking parent or asking administrators to make an additional phone call to a parent. A lot of elements of teaching that I feel like for a teacher that doesn't have a million other things on their mind, they probably could handle. Like gum is maybe not that big of an issue that requires administrative input, but I think that's more of a symptom of I am so overwhelmed that seeing a kid chewing gum, it might be what puts me over the edge and I need my admin.
Yeah, no, I mean, this is a whole nother topic of like my evolution on just kind of discipline, right? Like,
Hmm.
and how, my own from my own classroom teaching experience to then becoming an administrator and supporting teachers through this. Royce, we had amazing kids, right?
Yep.
But we also were really hard on them over things like,
Yeah.
you know, chewing gum
Yep.
or wearing the wrong
Dress code.
color
Yep.
pants or, or whatever it was. And there was I bought in at the time and I was the vice principal who had to enforce it all, right? But because I always kind of said if we were making an issue with, teenage rebellion over stuff that didn't really matter when we lost, it didn't really matter as long as we weren't dealing with, the significant issues of
Yeah.
where people were getting hurt or
Right.
and so let teenagers rebel on these kind of minor issues and even if they win, who cares, right?
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and I remember being there and a teacher there who kind of was admired a lot. Um, I learned throughout the year she wasn't necessarily admired a lot because she was great at pedagogy, which she was, but the admiration came from like, oh, her kids are in line, they follow everything, they know the routine for how to walk in, how to operate while they're there, how to walk out. And so that as a new teacher is something that I battled a lot too, because then I associated well-behaved rule followers as the product of good teaching
Right.
versus maybe creative, a little bit louder,
Right.
uh, thinkers willing to take risks that maybe doesn't look super clean in a traditional classroom view.
Sure.
And as a new teacher, that's you don't know what to do at that point because you're like, I don't know. And like, does my administration like that kind of, you know, discipline-based approach, or are they willing to? I think I remember it might have been the principal walked in at one point and I was standing on a desk because we were building these towers out of popsicles. I'm sure there was some
Yeah.
kind of instruction there that was pertinent. And you walked in and I was like, oh man, I really hope that they asked me what this was about later because otherwise they're just gonna assume I was messing around. And that is, I think, something for new teachers that is so important to one of the teacher guard principles that we push hard is that idea of embracing uncertainty because all I had in that instance that I just mentioned was a brief view of my principal's eyes when he walked in. And his expression was one of consistent, like it always looked angry to me, but I know that he wasn't. He just kind of had that face. So if I just went off of that, I could have gone home and thought like I'm going to lose my job. He was angry when he walked in and saw this. Maybe this isn't the profession for me. You can escalate things
Right.
so quickly when
Right.
you don't have that certainty. What are your thoughts on that? Teachers operating out of making assumptions.
Yeah, I think especially like, you have to I if you don't create a climate where teachers can innovate and fail, right? Then you're never gonna have an environment where kids can explore and fail. And it's just, it's so cliche now at this point, but like we're supposed to be building learning communities, right? Where
Mhm.
everybody's learning together, right? And it's learning with and from each other is the ideal kind of environment, both from the adults and the kids. And so, 100%. So the feedback, there's it's you have to really be a good communicator as leadership, so that you don't have that teacher who, has excelled their whole life and everything they've done. Now you come into a classroom where you're gonna fail half the
Yeah.
time.
Right.
And so, like, that insecurity that every first year teacher has, and for that matter, for year 1 through 5, I remember 4 or 5 years in, I still thought about quitting once a week because it was right. So it's you have to kind of those relationships, and that's the relationships between as many as you can between, amongst colleagues, between administration and teachers. If you're not building those relationships with kids and families and your colleagues, then we're not really building high quality learning environments, right? It just there
Yeah.
has to be an emphasis on that, so that well enough when that person walks in, that look on their face is not disapproval, right? It's
Right.
there has to be enough communication. And um, I like that idea of you had mentioned to me about the journaling, right? Like how
Yeah.
important that is. I think that's a really key component to support.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's why, that teacher, let's assume that they were part of the teacher guard program, they could go home that night and instead of going to sleep with that uncertainty, they could write it in their journal and say, hey, this is what happened. I am not sure how my principal may have taken it. And then I or another mentor would go in and respond to them the next day. And maybe by the next morning they read, don't worry about it. If you're really concerned about what the perspective of your administrator was, ask before you assume, that they think or feel about you a certain way. But it's kind of letting go of that anxiety for a minute, putting it on paper, not letting it affect your sleep, your well-being, your family time, and then dealing with it the next day after you've gotten a little bit more reassurance from somebody who's in the same boat as you. But super refreshing to hear, the approach that you have as an administrator. I think that your teachers, your staff, they're lucky to have you as someone who can take on the burdens of the role and not let it transmit to the way that you interact with them. So I'm jealous of them, Pete.
Hey, I got a job for you, man. If you want, get you back in.
um, I,
I remember having those talks with you when you were an intern,
yeah,
I remember talking to you about, like, hey, stay with us for a little while longer before
yeah,
you. I know you had other, you know, visions of being able to give back to your community and things
yeah,
like that. And I said, well, there'll be time for that for a
yeah.
while.
Yeah, that was one of the hardest decisions because, like you said, I mean, for a new teacher, you want that structure that you have at that school, and again, there was a lot of good community there, people that had been there for a long time. But I knew that I would grow more by going to a place that maybe didn't have that, and never know if it was the right or wrong decision, but it was a decision that I made.
You made it the right decision.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, we'll wrap up here, Pete. Thank you so much for giving us your time. If there's something that comes to mind, one takeaway message that you feel maybe in one sentence or two that you would say to a teacher who is on the verge of leaving the profession after their third or fourth year as we approach the end of the school year here, what would you say to them?
Say you're not alone, and you're right in that cusp of that time, like the critical time of your career when it starts to kick in, and everything that you've worked for, you're going to start to finally, reap the rewards of all your hard work. It's happening now, because I think it takes a good 5 to 10 years to get really good at it. I really do.
Yeah.
And it takes such a commitment. But then once you've made that commitment, 5 to 10 years, then it can really be an amazing profession, and you can really enjoy the fruits of your labor.
Don't give up. Thank you, Pete, for joining. I appreciate your time. I wish you a good rest of the day, man.
You too, man. Take care.
Take care.
Thank you for listening to today's episode. If you enjoyed it and found it helpful to your teaching journey, please don't forget to like and subscribe on YouTube or through your favorite podcast platform. We also appreciate any and all reviews or comments you leave. Thank you for joining us today, and tune in next week for our next episode.